Hi, welcome again to the economic capsule of the Puerto Rico economy under the voice of Heidie Calero. As you remember, our previous capsule concentrated on Puerto Rico's transformation, um, trying to indicate what were the tactics, the policies that enabled Puerto Rico's transformation. Now we are going to look at the next 2 decades, 1973 through 1993. Decades which I have entitled Growth and Recessions. This is the time when Puerto Rico suffered the first economic recession in 1975 with the oil shock. The barrel of oil, increased by $2.37 per barrel. And then the second oil shock was in 1981 and 1982, and the barrel increased by more than $30. So Puerto Rico's competitiveness based on cheap oil, cheap electricity, salaries which were below the federal minimum wage, all of that started changing during these 2 decades. What did the government of Puerto Rico engaged in? Well, we had in 1976, we had a strike of luck with Section 936, which enabled the expansion of pharmaceutical companies under this section of the U.S. tax code, which enabled these companies to repatriate their profits and the profits on the profits tax-free to the U.S. with some changes. Then we started seeing public corporations increasing in this investment in construction. Many of them were done by the government in infrastructure, 5.7% annually. And notice the increase in the public debt, 8.1% growth annually. This will be an important fact to consider in the next 2 economic capsules when we continue analyzing Puerto Rico's economic growth. Notice that private sector investment in construction was 3.8% per annum, but it was the government, the one that really carried the burden of this growth. Total jobs increased by 1.5%. Government jobs, another counter-cyclical policy, 2.2% job, and not necessarily with high productivity. Manufacturing jobs, 1%, they were capital intensive, and the federal transfers, the beginning of this economic dependence on federal transfer payments, increased annually 11.9%. That was the increase here with the food stamp program together with Section 936, which enabled Puerto Rico to grow to the tune of almost 5.4% by 1978. But in 1981-82, we had, again, with a second oil shock, Puerto Rico economic growth in negative terms, and again, an increase here, even though we saw during this period, both in 1975-76 as well as in 1981-82, increases in the interest rates, somewhere in the region of 11%, 20% prime rate, which impacted construction. Back in this period, Puerto Rico faced austerity measures under the guidance of Governor Hernandez Colon and an important economist, James Tobin, which recommended to Hernandez Colon, because our island was closed, as well as the city of New York closed to the financial markets. So we had to engage in real difficult austerity measures, which paid off in terms of economic growth, but cost the elections to Rafael Hernandez Colon. Then we continued with another governor, which also helped Puerto Rico. But notice that in 1983, 1993, they continued also with a counter-cyclical policies of construction in infrastructure. Again, public debt, 5.4% annual, slightly slower than in the decades of 73, 93, but it is in this second decade that you see high growth in terms of public debt. Transfer payments slowing its pace, but nonetheless still increasing. Continued dependence in Puerto Rico with increases in Medicare, increases in food stamp program. And what is important is that in terms of jobs, total jobs were 4.3%. Again, the government sector generating jobs, where the private sector was not generating that many, but nonetheless there was growth in manufacturing jobs. The challenge that Puerto Rico has been facing over these past 2 decades. In fact, the whole history of Puerto Rico, the challenge that we have not been able to surpass and deal with has been the generation of jobs. So we need to focus more in the next 2 economic capsules as to what have been some of the policies and the successes and the failures that have enabled Puerto Rico to stay in 2020 after almost 12 years of an economic recession. But stay tuned for the next economic capsule. Thank you.